Welcome to Comix Relics. I'm Ray Mescalado, and today we're going to talk about partworks and the bonuses they hold. Partworks is a subscription service, basically. You subscribe to a partworks, and then, like a magazine, you'll get a new installation every week or 2 weeks or month until the whole thing is complete, and you'll have a wonderful, comprehensive work at the end. Now, in the UK, there are companies that do comic book partworks, or rather graphic novel partworks. They'll be built around a theme, like this one, Marvel's Mightiest Heroes. There'll be all these Marvel stories collected, and as you can see, the spines of all these volumes will form one big picture, and by the end, you'll have a wonderful set of comic books to read, and they'll look beautiful on your shelf. I've picked up a few partworks volumes from Eaglemoss, specifically their DC Comics graphic novel collection. I'm not going for a complete set of these volumes. Instead, I'm just focusing on some of my favorite storylines and arcs. But one of the most gratifying things about this particular collection is that most volumes contain a bonus story after the main selection. And I like that there's some explanation for the choice, and that it provides further context to better appreciate what's being accomplished. So here's a stack of my Eaglemoss volumes, and while I'll comment quickly on the main story, this time I'm going to comment primarily on the bonus and see how they stack up. So first up is Swamp Thing Part 1, Volume 65 of the collection. And this is the start of a reprint of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. So we begin with the anatomy lesson all the way up to number 27. Great stories in and of themselves, but they're matched by the bonus story, which is the obvious choice of House of Secrets number 92 by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson. This 1971 story is the original Swamp Thing story, and it holds up so well today. A very young Louise Simonson, well, her name wasn't Louise Simonson at that point, but Wheezy is a model for the heroine of the story, which adds a little something as far as I'm concerned. And it really is a great little short story filled with horror, betrayal, and poignancy. So, yeah, this is a great match. It really adds to the Alan Moore story in its own way. And actually, Moore does tie in this original story to the main Swamp Thing continuity, which no one had done before. Next up is another favorite volume of mine, the New Teen Titans The Judas Contract, Volume 53 in the Eaglemoss collection. They went the same route as the Swamp Thing volume, with the very first appearance of the Teen Titans in 1964 in The Brave and the Bold number 54. In this case, it was Brave and the Bold, so it's all about team-ups, and the group wasn't even named yet. It was just teen sidekicks Robin, Kid Flash, and Aqualad getting together to take care of this guy named Mr. Twister, who kidnaps the teenagers of Haddon Corners, and Robin and Kid Flash and Aqualad all compete to see who have the best superpowers, before finally uniting as a team at the end. It's a fun story. It's a very Silver Age story. The competition is kind of hokey to me, and Robin's deduction that the ransom note wasn't written by a teen because it says music instead of jive. I don't know why. That's probably my favorite part. Like, do you speak jive? But yeah, it's a good Silver Age story. There's lots of fun scenes in it. Does it compare to the Judas Contract? Hell no. But it was a simpler time, and the historical significance of this is impossible to deny. Now, Volume 63 is another Alan Moore collection, Superman, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. It's not only the story that said goodbye to the pre-crisis Superman, it also contains For the Man Who Has Everything, which is a great story with Dave Gibbons as artist, and DC Comics Presents number 85, which features a Superman Swamp Thing team-up. With all that Alan Moore goodness, Superman number 30 was chosen for the bonus story. This 1944 story is the first appearance of Mr. Mxyzptlk, who we know factors into whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow. And I have to say, I like this one a lot, even though it's so different from Moore, or because it's so different from Moore. Alan Moore's Superman stories are hinged on hopefulness, but there's still something dark about them. This original Mr. Mxyzptlk story, though, this Golden Age story, is fun and silly and kind of madcap. It's just Mxyzptlk running around, causing trouble, being impish before Superman has to come in and intervene. And it even ends on a punchline, where Lois Lane slaps Clark Kent over one last trick Mxyzptlk pulled. So, yeah, it works as a palate cleanser. To recall a simpler, happier time for comic book superheroes. Before people like Alan Moore got their hands on it, I guess. Okay, next up is Volume 42, Batman's Strange Apparitions. Basically, Marshall Rogers' first run on Detective Comics. Most of it the classic run with Steve Englehart, though there are also stories by others, most notably Denny O'Neil in the final story printed here. The bonus story for this volume is Detective Comics number 36 from 1940. It's the first appearance of Hugo Strange, and what's really gratifying about this isn't just that it's the first Hugo Strange, but that we also get a very strong sense of how Strange Apparitions was influenced by the Golden Age of Batman. You can see the stylistic connections visually in some ways. The fact that the original story really plays up the idea of a detective. There are a couple of different scenes of Bruce Wayne being a detective, reasoning out clues, and figuring out how to defeat Strange. And certainly Englehart brings that into his stories. And I can even see that dark sensibility of the original story informing how Rogers depicts Batman. Next up, Volume 69, The Golden Age, that wonderful Elseworlds miniseries by James Robinson and Paul Smith. My book club actually covered this a few weeks back, and we even found some connections between Green Lantern and Tom of Finland. Then again, Tom of Finland I think is a bigger influence on superhero comics than most people want to admit. Anyway, the bonus story this time around is Justice League of America number 22. That's actually the second part of the Crisis on Two Earths storyline, the very first meeting of the JLA and the JSA. And part 2 does make more sense to me than part 1, because we get to see the different teams fighting their villains and then working together, and you at least get a resolution. If we got just part 1, it would have been a little more unsatisfying, though you would get that classic cover. The thing for me is, this is the Golden Age. Why not reprint a Golden Age JSA story? It would have shown us exactly what the JSA meant in the Golden Age. The sensibility behind it. You know, they could have punched a few Nazis if you chose the right story. It's not to slag JLA number 22, of course. But yeah, this is one case where I would have liked to have seen a different selection. I think this was a lost opportunity. Next up is Volume 85, The Legion of Superheroes, The Great Darkness Saga. What can I say? I'm a Legion fanboy. I love this story. It's not my favorite from the Levitz and Giffen run, but it's definitely a classic, and there's no denying just what a big story this is. One would think that this volume would include as a bonus story the very first appearance of the Legion in Adventure 247. Instead, and this is an interesting move, they went with a story of Adventure Comics number 300, the Earthlow story. The text piece that goes with it does a great job of explaining the significance of Adventure 300. This was when the Legion finally became more of a mainstay in comic books. And what I'm tickled by is that the face behind the lead mask is still in the very early stages of figuring out the Legion. Like, everyone is still listed as having a superpower, including super bouncing, super radiance, super shrinking. There's still this sense of the clubhouse mentality with behaving to the rules of conduct and membership initiation rituals. But I think the main attraction for the story for me is that they bring Mon-El into the Legion. And the tragic backstory of Mon-El is actually played wonderfully. They almost give him a Ben Grimm kind of hope where, okay, you can leave the Phantom Zone, just like you can turn Ben Grimm human, but it's not permanent. So there's definitely an emotional heart to the story. It's just not where you initially expect it to be. And I have to say, the Luthor robot filled with hate tapes in him is just hilarious. It's even labeled Hate Superboy, Hate Legion of Superheroes, Hate, Hate, Hate. Subtlety was not always a strong point in those days. Okay, now we're going to end off with the king himself, Jack Kirby, the Eaglemoss Collections Volume 81, New Gods Part 1, which reprints New Gods 1 to 6. This one has a really interesting choice to it. It has a story from Tales of the Unexpected number 16 from 1957, and it's about a man who finds a magic hammer, which creates storms and has great strength to it. So in a weird way, well before his debut in Journey into Mystery, the Magic Hammer is Jack Kirby's very first Thor story. The text page does kind of connect it because of the use of mythology in the Fourth World Saga, but really this bonus story is for the Marvel fans, for the Thor fans, and I'm not going to begrudge that. It's a really good story, by the way. The art's great for that era of Kirby. The story itself is actually really good. I mean, very enjoyable. And the last volume we're going to look at is volume 82, New Gods Part 2, which reprints 7 to 11. And they go back to the golden age for this one with Detective Comics number 64, the very first Boy Commando story, The Commandos Are Coming. The main reason this was chosen is because the character Brooklyn is Dick Turpin, who of course figures into the Fourth World Saga. Anyway, this story is interesting. The historical connection is interesting, but it's also looking at, how do I say this? There is such a layered story in The Commandos Are Coming. If anything, it's overlayered because there's the whole thing about Lafarge, then there's the Boy Commandos themselves. It ultimately feels like a spy thriller mixed in with a war comic with some action and a whole lot of agonizing over the French resistance. I really appreciate the ambition of it. Joe Simon and Jack Kirby really going for some wartime drama. But yeah, at the same time, it feels overstuffed and just a little too convoluted for me. So that's it for my look at bonus stories and partworks books. I know that I'll be picking up more of these partworks volumes. There's one I definitely have my eyes on, so it's just a matter of getting it from the UK at a reasonable price. But for now, thank you for indulging me. I'm Ray Mescalado. This is Comix Relics. Have a good day. Goodbye.